So I'm Avleen Vig, and talking about things that don't work right and getting interrupted. The slide remote doesn't work right. I can use the arrows. That's true. So I'm Avleen Vig. I'm an operations engineer at Etsy, and this is Carolyn Rowland. She's an IT manager.
So we have an operations engineer and a manager.
Yep.
Two sides.
And we're going to be talking about the kinds of things that interrupt us as engineers and managers in our profession, and ways that we can deal with them and kind of become more productive and more effective in what we do. But before we begin actually going into that, we're going to take kind of a look at a day in the life of an operations engineer. And this is what we're going to show you is kind of typical of what I deal with on a daily basis. Okay. So I get in the morning, and the first thing I look at is kind of my email. This is interesting. Someone wants me to look at some ganglia metrics today. Yeah? It's a little small. I can do that. That's probably after lunch. That'd be fine. Crap, what? CPU on Graphite 2 is high. That's pretty important. If I don't get that fixed, that's going to go bad. All right, what now? Software updates. I have time for software updates? I'll fix the CPU on this thing first. What now? Do I have... What? No, I don't. Go away, please. What now? Urgent. Who scheduled this? I don't have time for this today. And that's really typical. You know, that is like the first 10 minutes of my day is exactly that.
Now, ours isn't the only profession that deals with interruptions. The space program is a very good example where they deal with interruptions, and they've found ways to work around them, work through them, so that the space probes don't fall out of the sky.
So there's a story exactly around the space program that I want to share before we go too much further. Some of you guys may recognize this person. This is Gene Kranz. He was the NASA flight director for the Apollo 11 landing, and also during the Apollo 13 incident, where they had to try and figure out how to get those astronauts back home as quickly as possible. This is mission control. It's actually not too dissimilar to a busy NOC or some of the environments that a lot of us work in. And all of these people are taking inputs and they're working on things for Gene. And as they go, they have to bring these updates, these interruptions to Gene on what's going on. You know, what's the status of the astronauts? What's the status of the space capsules? You know, where are they? What's happening? How are we getting them back? And NASA has had to come up with ways to deal with, you know, one person taking all of these inputs and handling them efficiently.
But it's not just one person's problem. You see this room full of people. It's an organizational problem. If these people bring every alert to Gene, he can't possibly process all of those. So they have to have some kind of playbook that says, these are the kinds of things you bring to me, and only these things. And they have to be able to make decisions from those consoles to know, now I need to go interrupt Gene. Right. So then he can deal with it. So this is something, like we said, something that other places have had to deal with a lot. Nursing is another one. It's a very common example. Aviation.
So there's a lot of these things that we can learn from other industries. So let's think about what interruptions actually are. They're all around us. They happen all the time. There's a couple of ways we can break down interruptions into sort of three major categories, especially for our industry.
So active interruptions with people are when someone comes into your office or they call you on the phone. You can't really ignore them. They're right in your face or they're right there talking to you. You have to stop, you have to lose focus on what you're doing, and you have to pay attention to that person. These are extremely disruptive because you don't get to decide. You don't get to prioritize and say, I'm not going to pay attention to that person standing at my desk. You absolutely have to pay attention to them right then.
Right. And when you do, whatever you were working on that time, it's just gone. You have to stop, a complete context switch, talk to whoever it is, and then hope you can get back to wherever it was you were at the time. The next kind, sort of passive interruptions from people. These are things like email, social media, things that pop up, things that you can technically ignore for a little while, but you know that you have to get back to them. You have to look at them. You have to think about them at some point in your life.
The problem with these is that we've turned them into active interruptions. We've taken these things that we can ignore and get to later, and we've created little pop-ups and alerts. So when somebody retweets you or they send you an email, you get a little notification that says, ooh, look, Right. And that causes you to then lose focus and get distracted by that passive interruption.
So there was a 2013 study from Michigan State University where they took 300 people and gave them a really simple task. They said, here's a bunch of letters. We're going to put them in order. And while these people were doing this, fairly easy thing, any one of us could do it, every now and then they would give them a 3-second interruption. They say, stop. Okay, go. And they found that when they did this, just a 3-second interruption doubled the error rate of putting letters in order. It's really killer. It really, really gets to us. The final kind of interruptions that we deal with a lot are interruptions from systems. These are things like pages. A lot of us here, I'm sure, go on call at some point in time. You have things buzzing in your phone. In fact, I'm not on call right now, but I receive pages to my phone, and my phone's in my pocket buzzing while I'm talking to you guys. And these are constant things. These happen all the time. And we need to find ways to handle these as well.
And another problem with these is that they are actually active, because when you get one of these, you have to look at it and triage it before you can move on. So even if Avleen's phone is buzzing and it's not something he has to pay attention to, he still looks to look at it first to figure out if he has to pay attention to it.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some of the problems that how do we make these things worse, Carolyn? I mean, one of the ways is we're always interrupting ourselves.
This is the worst one. This is you looking at social media when you really don't have to.
This is the best one, because this is the one that we actually have the most control over, and the thing that we can actually really tackle very easily. Like I said, social media, these things we don't need to, but we love interrupting ourselves with these. Okay.
So we're kind of talking about interruptions like they're bad interruptions, but that's the work. This profession is an interrupt-driven profession. You're there to respond to these interruptions, to help people, to solve problems. If you didn't have these interruptions, you wouldn't be doing this job.
Right.
So it's not that we need to get rid of the interruptions. We need to learn how to deal with them better.
Right. It's really the interruptions actually drive a lot of our work. And while we hate them, while we feel that they get in the way, we'd love to work on that project, that piece of software, the thing we want to do, a lot of times the interruptions are the things that lead to the work that adds value to the business. So we have to really find ways to handle these better.
And admit it, this is the kind of job that you want to do because you like doing different things all the time. And those interruptions are kind of cool because you're not sitting at your desk doing one thing all day, every day. Your job changes every day. That's pretty awesome. So another thing about interruptions is that some studies have shown that if you are doing a really simple task, interruptions actually make you better. Because it's a very simple task, a rote task, and the interruptions force you to concentrate more on that task. It's when you're really doing something that requires focus that the interruption completely derails you.
There's also an investment factor to this. If you're only slightly invested in a task, you've only just begun to do it, when you get interrupted, you're much less likely to come back and try and finish it. It's something you can ignore. I'll come back to it another time. I don't really want to do it anymore. Whereas if it's something you've been doing for a while, you've been working on for a couple of hours, maybe a couple of days or longer, you're much, much more invested in it. You really want to come back and finish it. You hate the fact that you had to walk away from it, and you do get back to it much more quickly.
This is a dead sysadmin. Somebody in one of our run-throughs was like, what is that slide? This is the dead operations engineer on the floor of the server room. So what is the impact of all these interruptions? Well, it's stress, it's lack of sleep, you're burning out. You're doing so much and trying to manage all of these tasks at one time that it's really having a physical impact on you. But there's also a monetary impact.
Right. I'm going to ask a question if anyone wants to raise their hand. How much does somebody think the monetary impact of interruptions across the U.S. economy in 1 year might be? I saw a hand almost go up.
40%.
40% of the economy? That's actually not quite that high. But so in 2009, a research firm here in New York called Basics did a study of this. And they found that the actual impact to the U.S. economy in 1 year was $588 billion. Billion with a B. In 2011, there were only 11 countries in the world that had a higher gross national product than $588 billion. If we could find ways to deal with this, how much more productive would our economy be?
Oh, yes.
It would be fantastic. But we can't just talk about interrupts and say, hey, we'll just fix these, do these things, because there are things that actually are in the way of us dealing with these. And these are fallacies about the way that we work.
Oh, yes. So we have this whole set of beliefs. We really think we deal with interruptions well, don't we? We think, I got this. I know how to deal with interruptions. I'm really good at what I do.
It's not true.
Yeah.
So we're going to break down a couple of these first, and then we'll go into what it is you guys can do. The first one, we think we need to know everything. If we're not always connected, if we're not always getting pages like I am on my phone right now, which is still going off, we think we're going to miss stuff. Other people are going to know what's going on and we're not, or projects going to happen, decisions are going to get made, and we're just not going to be involved. There it goes again, it's buzzing. In 1971,
Give me the phone.
No. In 1971, a gentleman named Herb Simon was writing about the economics of attention. And he said, in an information-rich world, the wealth of information means a dearth of attention. We have so much information around us that if we keep trying to pile in more and more, we can pay less and less attention to the things that are really important, the things that really matter.
And you think about the technology that we have today. 10 years ago, we didn't have access to all the data that's coming in. We have data coming into our back pocket constantly.
Yeah.
How do we process that?
Right. So information is really not a scarce resource. There's a lot of it, but attention is very, very scarce.
This is limited. You only have one of these.
Calendars.
Calendars are awesome, right? You can schedule your time with them. You can set up meetings.
They're great for helping you schedule your time. That's wonderful when we use them that way. They're really terrible when we let other people schedule time for us, though.
This is a portal into your workday. So people can sneak in there and say, ooh, look, Avleen has 3 hours here. I think I'll pop a meeting right in the middle of that. Do you do that?
My boss is sitting right there. He does it all the time. It's like, hey, I want to talk to you, but I'm in the middle of something. Oh, okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, they really are great. They're handy when you can say, I'm going to be working on something for a set period of time. But if you don't put something in there, which, I don't put stuff that I'm going to be working on, writing a bit of code for 3 hours. Somebody comes in and they drop a meeting in on you. Really gets in the way and really breaks up your day and causes a huge interruption.
It's people stealing your time. They're deciding what your priorities are.
Pretty much.
That's sort of a theme here, too.
Yeah.
So this is also sort of the squeaky wheel. You come in the morning and you know that you're supposed to work on this task. This is the thing that you need to make some progress on today. So you come in and you're being a good employee. You're going to work on that task. The phone rings. Somebody calls you up, they have a problem. So you stop doing that important task and you turn to the thing that somebody called you about. You hang up, you're working on that now. Somebody walks in your office and they ask you for some help. So you drop the thing you were just working on and you go to the next thing. And you do that throughout your day. It's kind of like the plot of if you give a mouse a cookie. That's what I always think of. So what happened to that first task that you started working on? Did you ever go back to it, or are you just letting other people decide what your priorities are all day because they're coming in or they're calling you and they're interrupting you?
The next one, multitasking and productivity. A lot of us think that we're really good at multitasking.
I'm awesome at multitasking. I mean, come on, I'm a woman, I'm a mom. We're supposed to be really good at that, right?
You're as bad as I am and you know it. So
oh, no. Don't go there.
Okay. No one's quite as bad at multitasking as me. I can focus on and I can do one thing at a time, and I know that if I get interrupted, there's gonna be a problem. I'm one of those people who there are people who like to text and drive. They say they can do it. I'm not going to judge anybody. But I know that if I did it, it would end up very, very badly. I'm just not able to pay attention to things at a time.
Only 2% of the population can actually multitask.
Right. So in 2010, the National Institute of Health and Medical Research in Paris did another study on multitasking. Kind of similar to the first one I talked about. They had a group of volunteers, and they gave them a fairly simple task to do with letter ordering. They said, here's a list of unordered lowercase letters, and here's a list of unordered uppercase letters. Put 2 lowercase letters in order, then switch and put 2 uppercase letters in order. Seems fairly easy to do, right? Okay, so what they found was when they were monitoring these test subjects, that during each task, one part of their brain was active. It would flip from the left side to the right side and back again as they did this. And it was okay. They were able to focus on the one thing that they were working on, and they knew there was something else that their brain was remembering that had to be done.
2 things.
2 things at a time. Problem came up when they introduced a third task. And they said, whoa, something's wrong here. They found that the error rate actually tripled in trying to order letters. And not only that, but they actually found that one of the 3 tasks was very regularly just forgotten. It just didn't happen. So there's a compounding problem there, and it just wasn't, they're like, why is this happening? And they found that, it really comes down to the fact that we just have two sides to a brain, and we can only focus on one thing at a time.
You think about computers, which are programmed to be specifically task-driven. They don't multitask. You have one brain, one CPU, you're going to do one thing at a time. Even though it looks like you're doing a bunch of things at a time, you're really only doing one thing.
Right. This is our last fallacy, that switching tasks is a good thing, that we can go back and forth and move between lots of different things and we're getting a lot of stuff done. Not really.
Especially when the switching tasks is, I've got 10 minutes here, I'll go look at Reddit.
I do that all the time. I try not to. And we'll get to that as well. So, these are common things that we all deal with, and we think that we're really good at them. But we need to be aware that they're not actually helping us a whole lot. So, I think right now we don't deal with these things very well. We're here giving a talk about this. You guys are clearly interested in it.
Poster child.
It's pretty bad. So what do we do wrong right now?
Why do operations engineers think they need to work 24 hours a day? You don't, right? You're a manager. We don't want our people to work 24 hours a day. I'm a manager. I don't want to see my people online at 3 a.m. in the morning and then working a full day. You don't need to do that.
So I'm going to tell a story at this point, and this is something I snuck in at the last minute without telling Carolyn, because it's fun that way. I was on my way to give a talk about 2 weeks ago. I was going up to St. Paul to give a talk at Nagios World. And it was wonderful. I live in Northwest Arkansas, and it's about a 9-hour drive. It's fantastic. I love road trips. There's one thing I love, it's getting out, seeing the country, doing stuff. But I work too much. I was driving up on a Saturday, and the day started beautifully, it was great, it was sunny, and then it started to rain. And, when it's raining, you got to drive a little bit more carefully. You got to slow down a little bit. We weren't doing quite the speed limit. But possibly one of the worst things that could happen when you're driving in the rain happened, and one of our rear tires blew out. And at 70 miles an hour, we ended up skidding off the freeway. And this happened to the car. It was pretty destroyed. Fortunately, we walked away. Everything was all right. But that's not the point. During this event, I was sitting in the passenger seat and I was working. I had my laptop open, and I was trying to get stuff done because I wanted to be more productive, and this happened to my laptop. If I hadn't been working, my laptop would have been fine. But I destroyed it.
With his face.
With my face. There's another little story I'm going to share. In 2010, I joined Etsy, and it still is very likely, something I would consider close to my dream job. I get to work with people that are amazing. I get to do work that I personally really enjoy. There's a lot of really positive things about it. But I work too hard. When I started, I thought that I needed to really impress everybody, that I had to put in a lot of hours, that I had to get a lot of stuff done. So I was working 12, 14 hours a day, just doing as much as I could. Anytime somebody would interrupt me, I'd get that work done. And for probably 3 months, it was great. It was fine, not a problem. Keep doing it. But it starts to take a toll. I started to get more stressed out. I started to burn out a little bit. And my manager realized what was going on. And he said, dude, you got to stop doing this. There will always be work to do. It will never end. I said, okay, yeah, I'll stop. No, did not stop. Kept going. And in 2012, at my performance evaluation, which was awesome, I got a promotion, I got a raise, all my peers were pretty happy with what I was doing, but there was this one thing in there that really stuck out like a sore thumb, where Mike said, hey, you're still working way too hard, and you're really going to burn out, and it's going to be terrible.
This is a good manager, by the way.
Yeah. It took hitting me really where it hurt, like personally in my performance evaluation, for me to say, whoa, this is really bad. Even though I'm doing a lot of stuff and everyone likes it, this is really impacting my personal life, my career, everything. Just because I was working too many hours a day.
So stop it.
Okay. So what else do we do bad?
Oh, we use too many tools. We think that we're doing a great job with all these tools. We have a whiteboard. We carry around a little notebook. I've got some apps on my phone.
This is the only list with a bullet point. This is the only slide with a bullet point list this long, because there's just so much that we do. There was
Calendar.
There was a point about a year ago where I had 2 physical notebooks where I was taking notes of things I had to do during the day. I was also using Evernote. I saw, hey, it's a new shiny thing. I hadn't used it before then. Somebody said, hey, Evernote's cool, use it. So I said, okay. So I started taking notes in there. I had a text file open. And I was just doing all these things. But I quickly came to realize, where's my stuff coming from? Where's my work coming from? I have this serious issue of overload. There's just too many things I'm using at the same time, and they're actually being more work than I'm getting work done.
When you come in the morning, where do you look to figure out where your priorities are? Do you look at your whiteboard? Do you look at your notebook? Do you look at the sticky notes by your phone? Do you look in your online tool? Do you look in the project management system, the ticketing system, your calendar? Do you have to check all these things and then sort them somehow? Now you need a tool to manage the tools.
This is a really good example of tool overload, where you're using one tool way too much.
I want to know if this wall goes all the way around. Does the work just keep going? It never ends?
I've seen things like this, and it's kind of a nightmare, because much like a ticketing system, that's, a lot of us like to use ticketing systems because they help us track things. If we use them in the wrong way or too much, they end up like this. There's just so much information and no organization in
This is overwhelming.
Fortunately, there is something that we can actually do that really helps us, and we can learn from, and it's called interruption science. And it really does work. It helps us, there's a lot of things that it can teach us about the way that interruptions impact our daily lives.
Yeah, this is basically the study of interruptions and how they impact our lives. That's what interruption science is.
Okay.
So interruption science tells us a couple of things. We switch tasks about every 3 minutes. So Avleen, how many tasks do you do in a day that take 3 minutes?
I turn my laptop on. I have a lot of big tasks that I need to do. They don't take, I'm not able to shrink them down just into 3 minutes. But I know that every 3 minutes I'm switching mentally between what I'm doing. Maybe I'm working on like one method in a script, and then I'll switch and I'll look at something else. But really there's like these big overall tasks I'm trying to get done.
That's not a whole lot of time to focus on something really complicated. But it's not just that we switch tasks every 3 minutes. It's also that it takes us 25 minutes to get back on task. If we do, because only 40% of the time do we come back to that task.
Right.
60% of the time we squirrel away and do something else.
Right. Every time a major interruption happens that stops you completely doing what you're doing, it can take up to 25 minutes. This is something that's been said a lot, and there's a lot of science that goes behind proving this. It's actually very true.
An external interruption puts you in an interrupt mode. So if you're focused on something, you're working on it for 20 minutes, and somebody walks up to your desk, you've just been interrupted, you've lost your focus. So as soon as they walk away, you don't immediately think, oh, I'm going to go back and go right back to where I was mentally. You're now already interrupted. So now you can switch to another task. You can check the ticketing system, read your email, go look at Reddit. You're going to start self-interrupting.
Right. So talking about focus, there's actually very good reasons why you're not able to focus. And there were 2 people, David Woods and Emily Patterson, who wrote a paper. It was called Can We Ever Escape from Data Overload, a Cognitive Systems Diagnosis? And they did a lot of evaluations on the systems and how they interrupt us, and all this influx of data that we have coming in. And there's a very long quote that I was going to read, but I'm not going to, because it'll just, if there's one thing in this talk that'll put people to sleep, it's that quote.
I can read really fast.
No, it'll be bad. But essentially what they do in this is they describe a paradox. And that paradox, for example, if you have something that interrupts you, for example, like your monitoring system, it pages you, your phone's on your desk, you're sitting there doing something, and it goes off. How do you know that you can ignore that event, that interrupt, whatever it was, without actually looking at it and paying attention and evaluating it, at which point it's already interrupted you? It's very much a paradox about how we deal with these things that come in. So what can we do? There must be something.
Does anybody really have a pencil?
No?
Just check.
Okay, I should have changed that to something else. Okay.
Pencil.
So the first thing that you can really do, simplify your entire workload. And it's actually very easy to do.
Think about how work comes in for you. This is different for everybody. I can't say here's how your work comes in because I don't know what you do exactly. But an example might be if you're more of a junior level person, then maybe the ticketing system is the primary source of your work. And if you're more of a senior engineer, then you might have more project work that comes in through a project system. But you have all these other ways that work comes in. Can you funnel them into a more simple way of looking at your work so you don't have to be looking at so many things?
The next thing, and this is my favorite thing because I think this actually has the biggest impact on our lives right now, is resisting destructive urges. And destructive urges in this particular instance are social media things. They're really easy. We were saying earlier on, hey, why don't, something's, my code's compiling, or I'm waiting for a cookbook to upload, or waiting for something to run. I'm just going to spend a few minutes and go look at Twitter and just catch up what's going on. There's always something good on Twitter.
How many of these things do you really need to see during the workday? Do you really need Twitter to pop up? Do you need Facebook to be notifying you? If you don't need these notifications, turn them off. Because it's like a hook with a fish, and you're just tempted to grab that hook as it goes by. Reduce your notifications to the minimum that you need to get your job done. After you go home for the day, you can take some time and catch up on your social media, but during the workday, try to resist having all these things pop up and take your attention.
Right. So there's actually a story you have about this, right, Carolyn?
Ah, yes. So I did a little experiment on myself. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I had this really boring task. Nobody ever does boring tasks, right? I really didn't want to do it, but I had to do it. So I took myself out of my office, and I went into a room that had no landline, no cell signal, and no Wi-Fi. Took my laptop in there.
Some dark basement somewhere.
Yes, it was creepy. There were cobwebs. And I started working on this. After about 20 minutes, I was ready to chew my hand off. There were no notifications. There was no email. There was no contact with the outside world. I realized that I was hooked on all these notifications. I had to have this connection to the world. And by cutting myself off, I went crazy for 20 minutes.
That's only 20 minutes.
Yes.
Our work days are like 8-10 hours long. Imagine having no contact with anybody for that long. We've trained ourselves into expecting these interruptions. I expect my phone to go off. I expect Nagios to page me. I expect somebody to need me to do something. If everybody just went away for a couple of hours, I'd love it maybe a little bit because I might be able to get stuff done, but I would very, very quickly go completely crazy.
There was another study that we found that I can't remember where it was, but there were two groups of people, and they were given a simple task. Group A was given the task with no notifications. Group B was given the task, and all their normal notifications were there, so they had all kinds of interruptions. So Group A had this wonderful, focused opportunity to do this task. What did they do? They interrupted themselves. They stopped in the middle of the task, and they went to check their email because they thought they were missing something.
Right, a full half of them did this.
Yes.
Because they really felt that they were missing things. They had to get more in touch. What was going on? Why were things not going on?
Somebody must be looking for me.
Okay, so I have another little personal story. This whole talk's filled with personal stories, so I think they're great. So again, going back to a little while after I started Etsy, I woke up one morning, kind of a normal day, and I work from home. I work remotely, and sat down at my desk, and for some reason that I just couldn't figure out, maybe it was something that was on TV the night before, maybe it was something triggered this memory, but I had the Battle of Hastings in my head. The weirdest thing, absolutely out of nowhere.
I'm watching his manager's response over here.
So Mike knows this is how I think. This is my entire thought process. I couldn't get 1066 out of my head. I'd studied this at school. I grew up in England, so it was a big deal over there. And I knew about, what was going on, King Harold, all that stuff, but I still couldn't shake it. I needed to know more. There was something driving me to do this. It's just one of those things. I think it was about 10:30 in the morning. I was waiting for a little task to finish. It would have taken maybe 5 minutes for it to finish. I thought, I know, I'm going to take this opportunity and open up Wikipedia. Battle of Hastings. Let's find out. I'll read a little bit about it, and then I'll be able to move on. Curiosity will be satisfied. Won't need to worry about it. Wikipedia hole! 3 hours later, I'm reading about hydrogen fuel cell technology. Why did I start reading about how did I get there? I actually have no recollection about what happened in those 3 hours, except that by the time I got to this page, my stomach was rumbling and I'd missed lunch. That's all I know. Wikipedia is a very good example of how you can just sink time in and never get it back.
That's like a rabbit hole. You just go down. It's infinite. So it's so prevalent that we have our own XKCD about interruptions.
Marilyn Monroe, the gentleman who draws these wonderful comics for us, he found that he had similar issues with interruptions a few years ago. And he drew this cartoon, and there's a really good accompanying blog post that goes with it, where he's talking about different ways that he tried to break these urges to go look at things like Twitter and Facebook and other things during his day when he's supposed to be concentrating on work. Everything he tried, he tried a lot of different things, and nothing worked until he came across this one very simple concept. Every time he had a desire to go look at some kind of social media, he had to shut down his laptop, boot it back up, and then he could go look at it. And when he was done, shut it down, boot it back up, and go back to your normal work. Okay, that seems kind of crazy.
That's crazy.
But he very, very quickly found that just that 60 to 90 second break between wanting to do something and actually getting to do it suddenly made it boring. He just kind of didn't want to do it anymore. And after a few days of doing this, he had no more desire to look at Twitter and Facebook and Reddit during his workday. So he thought, this is kind of strange. I'm going to try and figure out why this is. Why is it that this thing worked where everything else, just trying to focus harder, just trying to close the browsers that have that other stuff in it, why did those things not work and this did? So he went, being the scientist he is, he had a lot of friends who are biomedical researchers and things, and they told him that every time he switched to doing something new, his brain considered that something novel and interesting, and there was a small dopamine release, a little reward, a little bit of crack for your brain.
Like a rat that gets a little sugar pill.
And it made him want to do it, even if there was nothing there. Even if he, switched to Twitter, refreshed, no new tweets, went back to his work, 30 seconds later, doing it again, because it made him feel good. It was like an addiction. Adding that very, very small break destroyed that cycle. And he just didn't want to do it anymore.
He retrained himself by creating pain instead of pleasure.
Right. So what else can we do?
Prioritize. So if you do not know what the business priorities of your organization are, how can you know what you're supposed to work on?
I actually have a question for everybody. Hands up if you know what the business priorities are for your organization for the next 6 months.
That's not bad.
That's not bad. I'd say about a third to a half of the people here. Okay, everybody who put their hands up, put your hands back up if the work you do during your day directly aligns with those business priorities. Like you actually think about, hey, I have this ticket come in or this work come in, and it aligns with my business priorities in a certain way.
Whoa, a lot less hands.
Oh, a lot less. Why did you not put your hand up? Okay.
We're picking on John.
This is concerning. I have to talk with you later about the withdrawal spa.
So if you don't know what your priorities are, talk to your manager. Because it's really important that you know what you're supposed to be doing, what's important to the organization. There are all kinds of fun projects you can come up with that can take up your entire day, your month, your year. But are those really important to your business? What does your business need from you?
Right. There's a book about this.
Yeah, there actually is.
Right.
How many people have read The Phoenix Project? Oh my gosh, I was hoping for a lot more hands. Come on, people, it's an easy read. It is not a dry business book. It's fun. It's got characters in it, and you might find yourself in that book. It is so easy to read, and I hate reading business books as a manager. I read it in just two sessions. In 2 days, I read the whole book.
Can you describe to people like what the Phoenix Project is about for most of us who haven't read it? I haven't read it yet.
What? I know.
Yes, don't look at me like that. I haven't read it yet.
So I don't want to give away any of the punchlines in the book, but there's an IT organization in this business, in the book, that is ineffective. It is the no people. It's the traditional IT is in the way of delivering the product or delivering value to the business. It's a cost center. It's this thing. We don't know why we have it because it doesn't work. And in the book, the IT organization figures out how to actually align itself with the business and help the business be better. And that's what we should be doing. IT should not be a cost center. We shouldn't be this this cost to the organization. And part of that is delivering value, which means prioritizing based on what your business needs. And then that helps you know what is important to work on. So when you get interrupted, you know, well, wait a minute, this is still my priority because I need to deliver this value.
Right. There's a lot about workflows as well, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Before we do, managers versus makers. This is probably a term that I'm sure some people here have heard. A gentleman named Paul Graham, who's one of the co-founders of Y Combinator, blogged about the different ways that managers and makers schedule their time on a daily basis. Managers, for example,
we schedule our time in 1 hour chunks on your calendar. Ooh, look, Avleen has 2 to 3 available today. I think I'll steal that. But that's our work, because getting people together and talking about what's going on and figuring out the status of certain projects, why something's not working, why something's blocked, that is how we work. We figure out how to make things run smoothly, but we have to talk to people and get them together in a room to figure out why stuff's not working and to move it forward.
There's a problem, though, because that really interrupts people like me who are makers. We sit there on a daily basis, we set up systems, we write code, we do a lot of stuff that involves spending large blocks of time, half-day or full-day chunks, that we need to dedicate to being able to do this. It goes back to the calendar thing. When I sit down in the morning and I see I have no meetings for the day, this is great, wonderful. I can spend an entire day working on something. But if I sit down at 9 a.m. at my desk and at 10:30 I have a meeting, I really don't want to start something big. It's kind of going to get interrupted. I'll come back to that one later on, maybe.
40% of the time.
40% of the time.
So what can we do? There's a problem here. There's like an us versus them. Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? Us managers don't find that as funny. But as a manager, what I can do is I can think about the meeting before I schedule it. Do I really need an hour? Why the heck do we default to an hour? Why is every meeting an hour?
I'd like 15-minute meetings.
Yes. Why can't a meeting be short? 10 minutes. I just need to touch base. Oh, I bet we can solve this in 10 to 15 minutes.
Right.
Do I need all these people in the meeting? Why am I inviting 15 people? Maybe I only need 3.
Yep. I actually find my calendar does have a lot of meetings in it, but one thing I can do is question whether I need to attend those meetings. There may be 50 people invited to a meeting just because that's kind of the default that somebody chose. They said, hey, I was going to invite the entire ops team. Someone will turn up. And managers may expect that, not the entire team's going to turn up, but somebody will, that, we'll be able to give an update on this project. But I feel like because it's in my calendar, I maybe need to attend. I may need to know what's going on. It goes back to that fallacy of needing to know everything, needing to be involved in everything. And the truth is, you really don't. Maybe somebody else on your team is already going to go. It's okay. It may be okay to say no. And one of the things I do whenever I see new meetings pop up in my calendar is I touch base with the person who organized it, and I just ask them, hey, do you really need me to attend? Can somebody else come? Does the entire team need to come? What's going on here?
Yeah, sometimes you can send a representative, or you can talk to your team and figure out, what's the point of this meeting? Who's the best person to go to this meeting?
The best thing you can do is if you actually talk to the person who organized the meeting, is find a way to cancel it. Just get rid of it. And find another way to get that information across that they need. Managers like to default to having, like Carolyn said, having meetings to organize these things because it's the way that it's been done for a long time, and it's convenient, it's easy. It's a way you can schedule things and know what's coming up. But maybe something like a short stand-up with 3 or 4 people would be just as good.
Another thing that managers can do is can think about the times of day that you're scheduling meetings. So if you're just scattering meetings like Skittles across people's calendar, well, that's completely disruptive. So maybe you can have meetings first thing in the morning, so you know that the majority of your team is here by 10, you need to touch base with them, so let's have a 10:30 meeting. Before anybody really gets started, they had time to get their coffee, check their email, do a little bit, and then they have the rest of the day to focus.